Oh, good afternoon, good evening, and thank you for joining us on the Desi Sportscast first hockey show. And in my opinion, people that have been following this podcast will know for a long time, hockey I still consider as our national game. Our guest might, differ with me in terms of my perceptions of where hockey stands in India at the moment. But it's a game that, just to give you how much I value how we do in hockey, is that it's a big year for Indian cricket with the World Test Championship and the T20 World Cup. But if somebody was to give me a choice, I'd say my priority is to get a medal at the Olympics. That's how much I care about Indian hockey. But one place where I do lack is the lack of coverage, and this is for me as well. Although I'm passionate and love the sport and follow the nation as much as I can, it's the lack of knowledge about the team, about the state of Indian hockey, and I'm hoping I'll get an education and upskilling in a hockey 101 from, and I'm very lucky to have him on the show, journalist Subhashish. Welcome to the show, and thank you so much for taking time out to talk about hockey on Desi Sportscast.
Thank you so much for having me on, Bharat.
No, the pleasure is ours. Like I said, I think not enough is talked about field hockey in India, especially outside for those of us that live outside the country. We know the incredible history we have of performances in the hockey world, but it's not been at that level for a long time, and I think that's why the coverage isn't the same as or what it should be. But my first question to you, Subhashish, is that, why hockey for yourself? Why did you get into being a journalist that covers hockey?
Well, Bharat, in India, you don't have to be a sports expert to know that India is a cricket only country. Although, if I might say, sports like badminton and football have been actually coming up off late. But I've been a hockey fan since I was a kid. I loved playing hockey, and I loved watching hockey as well. Except that the Indian team hadn't been doing too well back then. But there was always a lot of talent available. There was always a lot of interest in the game, which wasn't always reflected, like you said, in terms of the media coverage, etc. But I think we've actually come a long way. For example, the Indians hadn't qualified for the Olympics in 2008, and here we are in 2021, actually hoping that India can win a medal, which I think they can, except that the problem really is, Bharat, and if you don't mind, I'd just like to spend a couple of minutes in this. A lot of people who actually don't follow hockey that closely in India always relate to the 8 gold medals. Now, the 8 gold medals haven't come in the recent past. Hockey, I believe, was a different sport then, although it's still called a field hockey. It was a game of 70 minutes with two halves of 35 minutes each. You didn't have the rolling substitutions then. You didn't have the synthetic surfaces then. It was very different. The game was a lot slower. There was a lot of skill involved. And that is the reason why teams like India and Pakistan did well. Now, what happened subsequently is that with the change of surface, the European teams did have a distinct advantage because the game actually, became a lot more fast. The game became a lot more physical, and back then the Indians couldn't cope that well. I think now, today, India is one of the fittest teams on the hockey circuit, and that speaks volumes, about the way they've improved in terms of the work that the support staff have been doing. And since, coming back to the question of why hockey, I feel, people like me who've been diehard hockey supporters, who've actually been with the team through the dark days, for us, it's time to rejoice because we've been doing phenomenally off late. And here we are in the Pro League. Maybe we won't play any more games, but we are placed at number 3 among the top 9 teams in the world, which isn't bad at all. So, it's all paying off.
And I should mention that I'm very jealous of that beautiful shirt you're wearing. I love that shirt, and
Thank you.
It just shows your passion for the game. But before I get into the state of hockey in India, I have to start by saying that unfortunately we lost a former player and coach, MK Kaushik, overnight. A really
That's
sad
correct.
loss, and who did incredible for India as a coach and as a player. I think, if I'm not wrong, he was part of the Moscow team. You'll probably correct me, but
Yes, he was a part of the Moscow team, and he was an accomplished coach as well, a coach of the Indian women's team, and he did extremely well. In fact, the movie Chak De in India, which was released, I think, in 2007, if I'm not wrong, was partly based on the life of M.K. Kaushik, although not entirely. It was,
all right.
And I think it's common knowledge that 1980 was when we won our last gold medal. So every player from that team will always be very special to every Indian and to every Indian hockey fan, and a great loss, no doubt.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know some people don't count that as a proper gold medal, but I personally do. You can only beat the teams that are in front of you, and you still have to go out and win. So I class it as a proper gold. You were talking about the past glories and the stories of Indian hockey, and that's what I remember, and that's what most people think about. It is the past. And I was lucky enough to speak to Sundip Mishra, who's I know, a hockey journalist, and wrote a couple of books, and he was regaling me with some of this, and he's covered so many tournaments and what have you. But he was saying to me that the Hockey Federation, our federation, missed a big chance, of taking hockey to another level after the '75 World Cup win, when the hockey pitches and the conditions and what you were mentioning were changing. But the other positive side of it is that you sound very optimistic as to where our hockey is at the moment. Is that the case with the domestic scene as well?
Well, Bharat, I wish that was the scene with, that was the case with the domestic scene. Unfortunately, that isn't. Well, because India is a large country, and you have these small pockets where hockey is doing pretty well. One, you have the traditional areas like Punjab and Haryana, and even there you have the sports academies. You have 4 or 5 sports academies which are really world class, and most of the players are actually coming out of those academies. Then you go on to the east, and you have Odisha, which is doing pretty well. You have lots of players coming out of there thanks to a lot of government initiatives. You have some good services. You have a lot of promotion there. But elsewhere, it hasn't been that great. In fact, there was a tournament, a sub-junior national level tournament quite recently in Haryana, and where the boys were actually forced to play on dusty surfaces. They were not even grass surfaces; they were dusty surfaces. They actually had to stay in classrooms, and didn't have either proper food, nutrition, not even water, as far as I heard. And things like that. I mean, when you hear things like that, there is a lot wrong. For example, now in the Netherlands, you have coaching camps for kids as young as maybe 7 or 8 years old, like you have Den Bosch Club, etc. And most of the surfaces are actually synthetic surfaces. So the kids, even at that age, start playing on the synthetic surfaces.
Mm.
Now, India is a large country, and India is not, a, a particularly rich country.
Mm.
So you may not have that many synthetic surfaces, but what one expects, the least one can do is actually, at least have proper, at least have grass surfaces and proper facilities for the boys. So, I don't really think that a sub-junior national cricket tournament would be treated the same
No.
way. Just make a comparison. So,
Yeah, it is a sad feature of our sports that our federations just consistently let various aspects of what they control down, whether it's the women's side, whether it's the junior side, whether it's the facilities. It's just, I've been doing this podcast for a couple of years now, and it's one thing that is consistent is how bad our federations are. Even, dare I say, the BCCI has got a lot of faults. But I take your point about the artificial pitches and how our country is not the richest compared to some of the European ones in size and what have you. But I don't think it should be an excuse in this day and age for the federation to ensure that the artificial surfaces are available or tournaments are held on where those are available. So that it's still happening in 2021. It's very, very sad. But I remember, when like I said, I've been into a field hockey for a long time, and I remember, reading about, because that's all I could do, living in the UK at that time, was about the Bombay Gold Cup, the Baton Cup, then the India Hockey League. I thought was a fantastic idea. They seemed to replicate what the IPL did and raise our players to another level where they were playing, international stars on a regular basis. But from what you're saying, that progression has stopped. The focus isn't on those tournaments. The focus. I don't even remember being interested in the National Hockey Championships, and seeing how the teams were really passionate about winning those tournaments. But from what you're saying, that's not the case anymore.
But when I was growing up, there were teams like Indian Airlines, and a lot of the national players came from the Indian Airlines, from the Indian Railways. In fact, there used to be matches between teams of the Indian Railways and the Pakistan Railways, and the Indian Airlines and the Pakistan Airlines, because there were a lot of national players from India and Pakistan in these teams. So, I felt the domestic hockey scene was a lot better then. There was a lot of good media coverage as well. As far as the league is concerned, what we were told was that there wasn't a window for the international players to actually come to India, because the FIH was constantly experimenting with new tournaments and new formats. For example, in the past, you had the Champions Trophy every couple of years, and you had the Olympics and the World Cup separated by 2 years. Every 2 years, you had one of these tournaments. The FIH then started the hockey league of their own, which was the Hockey World League, and the Hockey World League, I felt, was pretty successful, but the FIH didn't. And now, of course, you've moved on. And for that reason, I believe, Bharat, that, it's a really big blow to the FIH, if I may say so, the pandemic, because it was really, really ambitious. What they conceived about the top 9 teams in the world actually playing a home and away format. In fact, the first edition of the tournament was really, it was grueling, because you had to play a couple of matches at home and then a couple of matches away. So you needed to have, a level of depth and a level of consistency, which was quite mind-boggling to play that many matches. But the reason they did that was that, like you can watch cricket year round. You can watch high level cricket year round, and
Yeah.
it's the same with football. So what the FIH wanted to do was to do something similar for hockey. So you can have a high level, a high quality international match every weekend. And India didn't play the first edition, and we're now India did play the second edition. I think they did pretty well. Uh, Against the top three teams in the world in 2020. That's Belgium, Australia, and Holland. And again, we've done well against Argentina, but unfortunately, the matches are cancelled. But coming back to your question, what I was told then was that there wasn't a window for the league to begin, but I think there's more to it than just that, because a lot of the international players as well liked coming to India, and they really enjoyed playing in the league. So I really wish it begins again. And I also wish, if I may add, Bharat, that I feel a lot, we need to have a system where the international players actually get to play in the domestic league,
Right.
in the domestic tournaments. So what happens is, when you have a player of the level of Manpreet Singh, or the actually top international players coming and playing with the smaller teams, let's say at the state level or the district level, it then pushes the standard of hockey up there, and then it pushes the overall standard up. So I think we need to see a lot more of that happening.
Yeah, and I couldn't understand why the federation dropped the Indian Hockey League. I think it generated a lot of interest. You saw the crowds, and I think more Indian players, like you said, were playing against. It wasn't just our internationals, but domestic players got to play against very, very good opposition, and it was just raising the standard. It's very, very similar to the IPL. How the IPL has raised standard of Indian cricket, and the depth
Absolutely.
of talent we've got, I think, was beginning to happen. And it was just a shame that it wasn't continued. I take on board what you said. The reasons they've given about the window. But I think if we can get one of our own elected president of the FIH, I'm sure we've got enough clout to get a window. And the players, like you said, I think, especially with the money that India generates in, even hockey, internationally, in terms of sponsorship, I think they would have attracted players from other federations, and federations would have been on board. So we'll see if that changes. I really, really hope it changes. And it's like a lot of Indian sports, domestically, we're not, apart from cricket, to be fair, we're not really doing enough to boost the popularity of our individual sports. But coming back to some of the coverage and the popularity, is there much coverage on Indian media, on Indian TV around hockey?
Well, Bharat, the Pro League is being covered because the networks actually had to sign an agreement that all the matches would be carried live. So the Hockey Pro League is being carried live by the Star Sports Network in India. Having said that, you'd be surprised to know that in 2019, the Indians played an international tournament in Malaysia, and I'm sure you're aware of the Azlan Shah Cup.
Yeah, yeah.
It's one of the premier hockey tournaments in India, and we couldn't watch a single match in India because apparently there was some confusion as to which of the two big networks were actually going to cover it, and one said the contract had expired, and the other said they hadn't got the contract, etc. And you actually don't see this happening, if I may say so again, for a game like cricket. So the Pro League is being covered because that's part of a contractual agreement with the FIH, and I feel that's really nice. But there isn't that much of hockey coverage. Although, Bharat, one has to speak in relative terms, because it's better now than before.
Right.
Because I remember a few years back when Indian hockey wasn't doing too well as well. There was absolutely nothing. I remember there were back in let's say 2011 or 2012, there was hardly any hockey to watch on television. So thankfully, it's better now. We do have the Pro League.
I don't even ask if the national championships are covered.
The national championships, some of the matches are covered. That's on by the national broadcaster, and I'm not sure what the level of viewership is, but one thing. It's also about the fact that there isn't a lot of passion among the journalistic community, if I may say so. Now, since you mentioned Sandeep Mishra, I had the good fortune of meeting this phenomenal hockey sports fan who's actually covered every single World Cup and he's got tattoos of
Oh wow!
the years. So that's passion. So when you speak to Sandeep Mishra, you feel that passion. I genuinely feel that India needs more people who have a similar level of passion, because when you have hockey journalists who are truly passionate about the game, and I'm not saying there aren't any, of course there are, but there aren't that many, you then put in that extra effort to try and promote the game, which I feel does wonders and will do wonders if more journalists come forward, because hockey as a sport, you wouldn't get the same numbers for hockey, whether you were writing about the sport or whether you were doing, let's say, a podcast. Not half, maybe not quarter the numbers you'd get.
Well, I want to change that.
Exactly, but you need to stick to it if you have the passion. So
No, 100%, and hopefully with the support of yourself, we will do that. I'm putting you on the spot now, so sorry about that. But in terms of before I come to what's happening at the moment, when I see coverage of major tournaments in Odisha, and fair play to the state government, they've pumped in a lot of money to make Odisha sort of the main place for the national team and the Indian team. But at the back of my head, I'm thinking, we've got a fantastic national stadium in Delhi that's seen incredible hockey. What do you think of the change to Odisha from Delhi?
Bharat, I think it's a welcome change, because all you need to do is to actually compare the two World Cups. There was a World Cup in Delhi in 2010, and there were lots of the stadium used to be empty, and I still remember there was not that much passion among the spectators. It was a World Cup, which failed to attract a lot of media coverage. You could actually see it. The empty stands were there for all to see, in sharp contrast, and the contrast couldn't be any more stark. In 2018, you had a World Cup like never before. It was the finest World Cup ever, so much so, Bharat, that any other country, if they host another World Cup, Hockey World Cup in future, the standards have been raised to such an extent now that it's going to be tough for any of the other hockey playing countries to actually match up.
Wow.
Whether it's in terms of the facilities for the media, the spectators, the kind of dressing rooms which the players had, with specialized areas set apart for goalkeepers, the kind of thought processes which went into every minute detail. It was just wonderful to see, and I can actually say with pride that the Odisha government have done something which makes us proud as hockey fans, definitely. But then again, it's only, as I said, it's only in pockets. So
no, but it's so heartening. I never knew it was rated so highly, and it was so well managed and run, because you don't get that sort of an insight when you're just watching the tournament from here. But that is so heartening to hear, and I can now understand why Bhubaneswar got the next World Cup in 2023, and I believe there's plans to build a brand new stadium as well for hockey.
That's correct. When Bhubaneswar was awarded the next World Cup as well, the FIH faced a lot of criticism and faced many questions as to why the World Cup was going back to India yet again. But something that the FIH said was very sensible. They said that, the amount of capital, the amount of effort which was actually put in to make that stadium. Now, a stadium, if it was used again in 2023, it would actually, make sense, because a lot of the money and the effort would be wasted if that wasn't the case. For example, the amount of capital one invests when you have an Olympic tournament, you put together all the infrastructure, etc. And once the Olympics ends, those facilities, are not used anymore, and may be considered a phenomenal waste, although it isn't looked at that way. So what the FIH said was that when you have a world-class stadium put together, why don't you use it twice over? That's perfectly fine, which I think makes sense.
Oh, 100%. I mean, there's a track record of stadiums being built for major tournaments that are now, in disrepair. You can think of the Rio Olympics, the Brazil World Cup. You can even go back to Greece Olympics, and I think in Montreal they're still paying for their Olympics. So, no, fair play to the FIH on taking that stance. You said you're living through. I mean, as a passionate Indian hockey fan, you've lived through the tough times, as you mentioned. It was tough following the national team, but you've been recently living through the good times, as it were, and hopefully they'll continue being good and get better. But did the good times start in 2019 with the appointment of Coach Reid?
Not really, but I think the good times started in 2016 because we made it to the quarterfinals at Rio after a very long time. I think it started with Roland Oaklands, and because we started doing pretty well in 2015 against a lot of the top teams, I felt we could actually have gone maybe a little bit further as well. We lost to Belgium in the quarterfinals at Rio. A lot of passionate Indian hockey fans felt we could have won that match and maybe made it to the semifinals as well. And we haven't actually let go of the momentum, in spite of the fact that a lot of coaches have changed along the way, which is pretty normal by Hockey India standards. But it hasn't affected the players, because if you see, no matter who the coach has been since 2016, the graph has always been upwards. We've moved up the rankings. We've been pretty consistent. There has been the odd hiccup. For example, when we lost the semifinals of the Asian Games to Malaysia, which was quite ridiculous. But by and large, I think the overall graph has gone upwards. Now, since you mentioned Graham Reid, Bharat, what I need to mention to you is when Graham Reid came in, there was this huge debate about Indian versus foreign coaches. Not sure if you're aware of it, but it was something that was raging, right? And Graham Reid wasn't particularly popular when he came in because he had just replaced an Indian coach who was extremely popular, and I can understand why, and that was Harendra Singh. So Graham Reid had to deliver, and deliver he did. I mean, we haven't had a lot of hockey because of the COVID pandemic, but whatever we've had, if you look at the results, against Belgium, Netherlands, Australia, Argentina, I mean, it just can't get better. We've played against some of the top teams in the world, and we've done pretty well. We've done well on the European tour as well. And I'm sure had the rest of the Pro League matches been held against Great Britain and Germany, I think we would have done quite well. So I think Graham Reid's done a good job without actually making too many changes. And he respects the fact that the previous coaches have done a good job as well. So it's a coordinated effort, and I think he's on the right track.
Yeah, and you mentioned a couple of things. I mean, yeah, we do go through national team hockey coaches like nobody's business. They don't seem to last for more than 2 years. Um, but just on that debate of a foreign coach or an Indian coach. I mean, before we didn't have the level of coaching. That was the reason given initially to bring in the foreign coaches. Where do you stand on that?
Well, Graham, I've spoken to a lot of the Indian players, and when you actually interview them, uh, you know, let's say for a particular media organization, then they say things that are politically correct. But when you actually have chats with them offline, so to speak, they open up. And trust me, a lot of them have told me that when the foreign coaches did come in, they simply had to. There was no other way. Because if they hadn't come in at that particular stage, Indian hockey would have just fallen off a cliff, right? So you had Rick Charlesworth come in, and he couldn't do much. But from 2010, you had Jose Brasa, Michael Knox, etc. They did their bit, but I felt that Roland Oatmans, with all his experience, did a phenomenal job. Sean Marine had a brief tenure, but he did what he could. He tried to make some changes, and he also brought in some exciting young players who are actually doing very well today. That's Vivek Prasad, Dilpreet Singh, etc., who are part of the team now. Harendra Singh had an impossible task ahead of him. And I remember in the first press conference after Harendra Singh took over, we actually asked him that you have three really big tournaments, the Asian Games, the World Cup, and prior to that, the Champions Trophy ahead of you. And the Champions Trophy at the time was just less than 2 months away. So what do you plan to do? And Harendra Singh said, I know the team, I know the language, I know the culture. I know I don't have to change much. So, I'm okay. I'm going to take it on. But I think he did pretty well too. I mean, we reached the finals of the Champions Trophy, almost beat Australia. And beating Australia in hockey is, it's the ultimate achievement. We almost got there. And then, as is the case with Indian hockey ever so often, we are erratic and we're not consistent, which is why we lost the Asian Games semi-final. And, Harendra Singh's trouble started there. I think we did pretty well in the World Cup. Losing to Holland in a quarterfinal isn't, disastrous. So I personally don't think that Harendra Singh should have actually lost his job. But then, if you look back, the same can be said about a lot of the other coaches as well. So I think Graham Reed, what Graham Reed has done, and this is what he's actually said in a lot of interviews, is that the state of the present team is the sum total, as he says, is the term he likes to use, of the work done by the coaches in the past. So I'd like to take it forward. He hasn't done anything drastic, tried to make too many changes, or tried anything, any new innovations. He's done the right thing. But coming back to your question, Bharat, I really do not think that there are that many Indian coaches currently who are either willing to take the job on or have the expertise. That is just my view. Although the popular sentiment in India right now is that we should do away with foreign coaches, but my question is who? Now, Harendra Singh is now the coach of the US team. You have people like Jude Felix. I'm not sure if they're still in favor with Hockey India, and I don't know who they are. So if there are people arguing for an Indian coach, I'd be happy if they tell me who they are, who are they looking at, because I don't see that many people, vying for the job. It's something which Roland Oatmans once said in an interview. He said, not that many senior or ex-Indian players are actually going ahead and trying to get into coaching jobs. So I think that's where the problem lies.
Yeah, that is sad, and it's another thing that the federation needs to look at, because we do need that coaching standard to go up, because domestically that makes a difference, and obviously it gives you the options moving up, because you want to get to a situation where we do have a coach from the nation that's good enough and at that level that we can confidently put the job into their hands. But it is a tough job for nobody. I think that's part of it. Even though we've not won any titles for the past I don't know how many years, but it's still a very high-profile job, isn't it? Being the national hockey team coach and the pressures that it brings. And Coach Reid, I think, was a little bit lucky, is that the word, that when he came in, we had the Olympics playoffs where we were playing the likes of Russia and Uzbekistan and South Africa, teams that we should quite rightly see off, and which we did, to be fair. But then the real test came when the FIH Pro League, like you said, came in, and the performances against I think they only lost 2 games against Australia and Belgium in that time last year, last year. So there were brilliant performances against top level teams.
Absolutely. What happened was that in 2019, since India went part of the FIH Pro League, there wasn't a single match against one of the better teams. As you said, India had to play the Olympic qualifiers, etc. And one might well argue that Graham Reid had time to settle in, but I think he made the most of that time. And you can only win, or you can only play against who you slotted to play. So I think that's fair enough. And something about Graham Reid is that also. Graham Reid is someone who was part of the great Australian team of the 1980s as a player. He's played alongside people like Rick Charlesworth, etc. I would consider that team to be one of the best in history. It was a phenomenal side, and he has lots of experience. He was assistant coach in the Netherlands before he moved to India, and I've actually spoken to Max Caldas, who is the Dutch coach, who actually told me that Graham Reid has a great understanding of international hockey and will be able to do a really good job. I think which he has. But then, since we are approaching the Olympics, Bharat, it's not the first time that India have raised expectations. They've done that many times in the past before the major tournaments, and when the actual tournaments, when the crunch matches arrive, that's when the Indians somehow, don't meet expectations. So I'm just hoping that doesn't happen again.
100%, and I was thinking as you said that it's very similar to England in football tournaments beforehand. There's a lot of hype. This is going to be our year. It's been 1966 since they last won a major tournament, and again this year before the Euros in the summer, there's high expectations. And I feel, to be fair, even myself, when the Olympics come round, when the World Cup comes round, my expectations of the Indian team is get to the semi-finals. I'll be so happy if you get to the semi-finals, and then they struggle in the quarter-finals and what have you. But one of the reasons I wanted the podcast this weekend was that it was meant to be the start of a very big month for the team in preparation for the Tokyo Olympics, and unfortunately, because of the pandemic, the games against England and Spain and Germany have been postponed. I was hoping to go to the England game actually today, Sunday. How much of an impact will that have on our preparations?
Well, Bharat, the England games, of course, are going to be special, I think, at the Lee Valley Hockey Centre. And But against Germany, we haven't played a match against Germany for the last 3.5 years. The last time we played against Germany was in 2017. That was in the Hockey World League finals, and that was, I think it was the bronze medal match. And we beat Germany 2-1, but that was a German team. More than half the German team were ill, and that was a match in which the crowd actually cheered for Germany, even though the Germans lost, because more than half the side were ill, and they couldn't make any substitutions because there was no one left on the bench. But the team did really well. Germany are one side who've lost their way in the past, but in the Pro League, if you actually look at the last few matches, they've come back very strongly. And I think the Indians, it would have been really interesting to have an India-Germany match because the Germans now look a team rejuvenated, and the Indians are in form as well. And Germany and India find themselves in different pools in the Olympics. And, an India-Germany quarterfinal may well be on the cards. So, if that does happen, I think the Indians have definitely lost out in being unable, to play Germany because, the Germans are going to be more or less, I would say, an unknown entity. I think we haven't played Germany for a very long time. We could have played Spain as well. I think Spain are a very attacking side, and I was actually hoping that the matches against Germany and Spain go through. After one against GB was cancelled. Well, of course, it will impact the team. There's absolutely no doubt in that. And that's one reason why Graham Reed actually said that even the practice matches against Argentina, not just the Pro League matches, but the practice matches before the Pro League and after the Pro League, were just as important as the Pro League, because every international match you get at the moment is precious. So I just hope the Indians have made the most of those matches. And I think it's really sad because the Indians are now number 3 in the Pro League table, but don't have a match left in the season, while the other teams do, because the European teams get to play against each other. Australia and New Zealand aren't going to play any more matches. So it's left to the European teams to actually go up the Pro League ladder. But I don't think the Pro League is that important, but I just hope that the Indians have done enough and, can build from whatever experience, they've gained through the recent matches. It is going to be a strange Olympics, Bharat. It's not something that any of the teams have ever seen before. And Australia and New Zealand haven't played a lot as well in the recent past. But if you actually look at the performances, I think the Indians are right up there. Because if you actually follow the Pro League, I think we've been one of the most consistent sides. So just hoping that the Indians will do well in the Olympics this time, and a semi-final is definitely on the cards.
Well, I hope so. And with 73, 74 days to go, I think missing out on these Pro League games against the Europeans will have an impact, but hopefully, not too much of an impact once the Olympics start. And like you said, I wasn't aware of the lack of hockey that New Zealand and Australia have had as well, so there'll be tough preparations for them as well. But I think they can look back on the tour of Argentina with a lot of hope. I was lucky enough to see the games live here. It was at the right time, so my first taste of international hockey this year. So it really heartening to see the performances on both of those games, and reading about the games beforehand, the warm-up games. But India have been, they're third in the FIH Pro League at the moment, but internationally in terms of rankings, they've been 5th since 2018. Would you agree that the gap between 5th and the top four is razor thin. It's on the day, and it's not that big a gap. Or do you disagree and say that the likes of Belgium and Australia are still a little bit ahead of India?
No, Bharat, I wouldn't say it's razor thin, because the Indians have got to be a lot more consistent, to actually bridge that gap. And also, if I may add, although I've been pretty elated, as is every Indian hockey fan, about India's performances in the Pro League last year, some of the coaches who I've spoken to have actually told me not, to put too much into those performances, because apparently the European club season was actually, beginning, when India was playing the Pro League matches. So what they've told me is that the teams hadn't started gelling as a unit at the national level, because the players actually concentrate a lot more on club hockey at that particular point in time. So what they told me was to wait and see, because those teams would start playing better with time, which I'm sure they will, because Belgium are not a side which have done well for the last 1 or 2 years. They've been doing consistently ever since, they've really come up in hockey. That was a decade ago, following their victory against Germany in the Olympic qualifiers. The Belgians are way ahead in the Pro League. They have a depth of talent which is quite incredible, simply because if you actually look at the players, a lot of the players who won silver in Rio are still around, and they're still performing just as well. A lot of observers actually, wanted to see the Belgians would continue to do well once the current crop moved on, but that hasn't happened, and that isn't likely to happen in the near future. So I think Belgium is way ahead. As far as Australia are concerned, they have been the number one team in world hockey for as far back as I can remember. And you may be able to play well against Australia. We did do well in the Champions Trophy finals, etc. But to actually say that we are a better team than Australia, I think will take a lot of doing, because if you actually look at the head-to-head record between India and Australia, it's pretty one-sided. And with the Dutch, we've had so many changes of coaches over the past few years, but they've stuck with Max Caldas for the simple reason that the Dutch don't look, they don't simply look at the results of the matches. They have a particular plan for every tournament, and if that plan is fulfilled, they see it as a success. For example, the Netherlands in the Champions Trophy, they lost to India, but in the World Cup, they beat Australia in the semi-finals. I think it was a phenomenal match, and lost out narrowly in the finals. So teams like that know just where to step up. And I think the Netherlands have a phenomenal depth of talent. If you watch the Pro League last year, if you actually look at the matches, there were games in which the Netherlands would rotate more than 70% of their team. And if you actually look at the games, there would be no change in the structure, no change in the manner they played, even though there were as many as 20 different players taking the field. So I think we've a long way to go before we actually reach that level, but we are knocking on the doors, that's for sure.
Of getting into the top four. That's heartening to hear as well. In terms of we'll look forward to the Olympics in due course, and we've seen the tables, the groups that we're in. Would you agree that we've, how shall I say it, easier group than the other one? Because when I looked at it, with Belgium, Germany, Netherlands and Britain in the other group, and we've got Australia, Spain, Argentina, New Zealand, and Japan, we should be looking at a top two finish. Or is it too early to say that?
Well, when you have a crossover or a quarterfinals, I think it negates the easy and the difficult group, because if you are in an easy group, you then face a difficult
Yeah.
team in the crossover or the quarterfinal, which is a knockout game, and that's precisely what Graham Reed told me when I asked him this question. So I don't think so. I think as far as the Olympics are concerned, I think every single team raises the level of their game phenomenally. So much so, Bharat, that although the Australians have been the number one team in the world, they have just one Olympic gold medal to their name. And I actually asked this question to Graham Reed, who was rather irritated because he didn't relish this question. Apparently, it's something he's been asked a number of times. But what he said was that, the Olympics are different to any other tournament in the world because every team wants to win the Olympics. So every team is willing to go that much harder. They're willing to put in that much extra. So, I really hope that the Indians do make it. However, you have Japan in the pool. Now, Japan are the Asian Games champions, and they've done pretty well recently. In fact, the Japanese beat Great Britain. There was a tournament in Malaysia. Japan, Great Britain, Malaysia, and the friendlies, etc. So you never know, because in a big match, if you have a couple of bad days at the office, things can suddenly get really difficult. So I really don't think that the Indian team right now would be actually focusing on where they can go rather. But in spite of the fact that we've been erratic, in spite of the fact that we haven't been the most consistent team in the world, in spite of the fact that the Olympics will be tough, I really believe that this time it's India's Olympics, and I really feel we'll get there for the simple reason that we've got a young team, we've got a very fit team, we've got a coach who knows what it takes to win gold medals. In the past, there was a lot of indiscipline in the side, although you had very talented players, as Bharat Chetri, India's goalkeeper and captain of the 2012 Olympics, once told me. He said, in the past, in the Indian team, you have the so-called heroes and the so-called zeros. So you had players, you had to look up to, and the others considered, the ones who were not considered good enough, etc.
Right, yeah.
That isn't the case now. I think they're gelling really well. So I think if I was a rival team, I'd be looking up at India, saying that India is the team to beat in Tokyo.
Yeah, and I'll come to the players and the current squad at the moment and ask you to give me, as part of my hockey 101, your 11 that would start ideally. But just when you were talking earlier, just one of the things I was thinking about is how remarkable Belgium have turned around their hockey, because they weren't a hockey nation before. It's similar to, would you agree, what Spain did back in a few years ago, where they don't have a history of hockey, but they became a power in hockey as well. It's amazing how these European teams seem to turn it around very quickly with investment and putting in the time.
Absolutely. Spain did it, but not for very long. And as far as Belgium are concerned, I think they invested a lot in the younger players. So the current lot, which are doing very well, have actually been nurtured at a very young age. There was a process in place by the Belgian Hockey Association to actually push up the levels. And what you're seeing, as far as the Belgians are concerned, is not some kind of a miracle. It's part of a very structured process, which is actually yielding results. As far as Spain are concerned, yes, I think Spain also went up the ladder but couldn't stay up. for that long. And same is the case with Argentina. Argentina went a great force to reckon with. Although I would say that in the 2016 World Cup, it was almost a one-man show because they had Gonzalo Pea, and he was a phenomenal PC specialist. But I think the Belgians overall, on the whole, have been the Belgian model is something which a lot of teams will actually be looking closely at and attempting to follow. I think Indians can actually, take a leaf or two out of that the Belgian book as well.
Yeah, I think it's a model that, if possible to replicate it, certainly works. And what you mentioned about the Germans as well, I mean, they're just like the football team, they always turn up at the tournament somehow. But it seems it's the same case with the Netherlands as well. So it's going to be a very, very tough one. I'll take on board what you said about, if you're in a slightly weaker group than the other one, then in the crossover you're going to meet those teams. And I was just thinking ahead before you enlighten me on where Netherlands and the like are. If we finish in the top two, we might avoid Belgium and Germany in the crossover. But it's never that simple, is it? But in terms of the current squad and the players that we have, would you be able to tell me your 11 that would start the first game against, I think it's New Zealand, our first game. I know it's very, very early, but ideally at the moment, who would be your starting lineup? And hockey, one of the things that sometimes confuses me, and I'm sure a few other people, is the formations, because it's not as straightforward as football or other sports. Can you talk through your 11 and the positions and ideal formation for India?
Well, as far as hockey is concerned, the starting 11 is something which is put up at the beginning of every game. Yet, unlike a football starting 11, it's very different because of the rolling substitutions, etc. But then, as far as goalkeepers are concerned, since you have a couple of goalkeepers and we have only two now, you have Swijesh and you have Krishan Pathak, not much room for change there. So I'm sure they would be the ones to start. As far as the defenders are concerned, you have Harmanpreet Singh, and he is one of the best defenders in the world today, along with being one of the best PC specialists, someone who is extremely cool and someone who's matured very early. You have Varun Kumar, who, in 2018, up until the middle of 2019, played every single match and every single tournament without a single injury, without a fitness problem, or without being dropped for lack of form. So Varun would definitely, be in my side. As far as the defenders are concerned, Surinder Kumar for me is another one who picks himself, and Amit Rohidas as well. And also Bharat, Amit Rohidas, Harmanpreet Singh and Varun Kumar are also really precious to India because all of them can actually, as far as the PC batteries are concerned, when they line up as the first and second, can confuse most goalkeepers because all of them have the capacity to actually do very well with the PCs, and that's a big plus for India. As far as the midfield is concerned, you have, of course, the captain, Manpreet Singh.
I hear a lot of good things about him.
Absolutely. And, recently, a lot of people actually say that India is a team who concede goals in the last few minutes. If you've actually, been reading about Indian hockey, etc., there's a lot said about lack of killer instinct and, lack of fitness, etc., which isn't the case anymore. But India can score goals at the last minute as well. If you actually go back to the first Pro League match against Argentina, the Argentinians had more or less were trying to sit on their 2-1 lead and were knocking the ball around as if the match was already in the pocket. And it was Manpreet Singh with his, amazing, inspired effort, who actually earned the PC and turned it all around. So
Mm.
Manpreet is one player who can actually turn a match on its head. He's done it in the past, and he's a great source of inspiration to his junior colleague in the midfields, that Vivek Prasad, the young prodigy, who again really looks up to Manpreet. So I think the Indian midfield is again really compact as compared to before. As far as the strikers are concerned, I think there's a problem of plenty,
All right.
because I mean, as a coach, who are you going to keep out when there is so much talent available? You have someone like Akashdeep Singh, who was actually not picked for the Pro League matches against Argentina. He's one of the best strikers in the world. Uh, he's someone, if you actually go back to the Asian Games, he scored some astounding goals with his reverse strikes, etc. You have Ramandeep Singh, who's been struggling with injury. He actually missed the World Cup. Since then, he's come back. And I would very much like to see him as part of the 11, although he didn't actually play the Pro League matches against Argentina. And maybe I'm a bit emotional as far as Ramandeep is concerned, because I know, I've spoken to him many a time, and I know how passionate he is about the game. And he actually missed the World Cup, and I definitely hope he gets to play the Olympics, since he deserves to be there. And he also combines extremely well with the other strikers. You have Mandeep Singh, who is the poacher, in the four of who I describe as the fearsome foursome. And Mandeep has the ability to actually, put himself in those positions in front of goal where the defenders would least expect him to be, and which is a talent you need to be born with. I mean, to anticipate where the ball would be and at a particular point in time, as compared to the defensive formations, etc., is not something which can be taught, not
No,
something
it's
which a coach
instinct,
can
isn't it?
actually. Yeah. So that's pure opportunism, and I think Mandeep is really good with his poaching abilities. As far as the rest of the strikers are concerned, I don't know. If you actually, if I was the coach, I'd have a tough time deciding, who to keep out, because again, you have someone as senior like SV Sunil, who hasn't played a lot of major tournaments. He used to be the live wire, and he, hasn't done so well. You have the phenomenally talented Lalit Upadhyay, uh, who, is one of the most talented strikers in the world. He can actually get past any defensive combination. And he's been doing well, if you remember, in the Pro League as well. So it's really tough, but I would go with Lalit, Ramandeep, Mandeep, and Akashdeep as the four strikers who are my favorite. So I
Fantastic.
think that would.
And that's a good problem for Coach Reed to have if there's an abundance of players to choose from up front. And the way you've described the players is just raised my expectations of and hope moving into the tournament, which is never a good thing. Yeah, I think this year, I know I've said it before, that come Olympics, it's we always think we're going to get to a medal position or the semi-finals to fight for a medal position. But from what you've said today, I think we've got a very, very realistic chance, more than we have had in the recent past. So I hope we'll see how it goes in Tokyo, but I hope they live up to it this time. Subhashish, I said, this is an education for me. It has been an education, a fantastic insight into the state of hockey, but more importantly, the state of our national team at the moment, which is looking bright. For people, and I want to encourage as many people as possible to follow your articles and yourself. How can they do that? Where can they catch you?
Well, Bharat, as far as being a freelance right now, it's pretty tough because there hasn't been a lot of hockey played, in the recent past as well. But I do hope to be covering the Olympics. So if I do cover the Olympics, I would, definitely be available with my stories, etc. Possibly writing for the bridge. So I'm definitely looking forward to it, though nothing is, certain as yet because I was just reading a story last week about how Japan is now in a state of emergency, and apparently there was a referendum in Japan, and public opinion seems to be swaying just a bit against the games because there have been more than 20,000, I don't remember the number, but signatures of people who say they don't want the games. And I really don't know where we go from here because in India, things are, pretty bad at the moment. I'm hoping things would be looking up soon. Hoping that the travel restrictions are lifted because there's not much time left for the Olympics. But somewhere deep down, I do hope that things will actually be looking up pretty soon. I'm sure that the Indians will do well, and I'm sure that the Indian hockey will see better days pretty soon.
Yeah, absolutely, and I think Tokyo. I do feel for them the investment they've put in, and then the pandemic to hit. But I think they had a closed door test of the athletic stadium today, so I think they're continuing with that. But I totally understand where the public are on this, and we'll see if anything changes. But at the moment, the plans are that the Olympics will go ahead with obviously no crowds from abroad, a huge bubble for the sportsmen, which is going to be, and women, and it's going to be very, very different Olympics to what we usually are used to. But I totally appreciate, about, there'll be more stuff from yourself during the Olympics and building up to the Olympics. But one thing I hope you don't mind sharing is your Twitter handle.
Absolutely. I would be sharing my Twitter handle, etc., with you, Bharat, immediately after the show. So you can actually follow my whichever stories I put out. I will be putting it out on Twitter, and I hope you enjoy them, and a lot of other people do too.
I'm sure they will. I've really enjoyed talking to you today, my friend. Really, really, I can't thank you enough for taking time out, and I want to continue with these hockey podcasts on a regular basis, and hopefully you'll be able to continue coming on the show, because I don't think we talk enough about hockey, not just because it's the Olympics year. Alright, that might have been one of the main reasons we focused on, but even afterwards there's a Junior World Cup hopefully going to happen. Like you said, the FIH is trying to make hockey into all year round competitions in various formats, so plenty to talk about, and hopefully we can continue this ride as India hockey rises as well. But for today, thank you so much, my friend. Really enjoyed talking to you. It's been a great insight.
Absolute pleasure, Bharat. And if I may add, there's something I missed out as well. The FIH is also starting a Hockey Fives tournament. I think that's going to be in October in Switzerland, and the Indians are going to be on board as well. So that's something the FIH is doing to try and make hockey more popular. Something like the Cricket 2020, if you'd like to make a comparison. So that's coming up as well.
fantastic. That's even more hockey to look forward to this year, my friend, and hopefully I can look forward to it with you. But the final message for me is please stay safe. I know things are very, very tough back home. We get the updates and news, and I've talked about it on other podcasts, but my prayers and wishes are with yourself and your family, and the nation obviously gets through this very tough times soon. But stay safe, my friend, and I'll talk to you soon.
Thank you so much, Bharat. You stay safe.